Poll question, having moved into first overall in points, do you believe the Canucks the best team in the NHL? Very cheery poll question here for Canucks fans.
With a
yes
wink.
or no? You can vote at Sekeres Price on Twitter and YouTube. Here's Frank Seravalli, his final hit before a Christmas vacation. Of course, from the Frankly Speaking podcast and the Daily Faceoff. Merry Christmas, Frank.
Merry Christmas, guys. Glad to be with you. Having joined the Sekeres and Price family this year is one of the bright spots of 2023. And I've got my PSA for anyone watching on YouTube. You can't drink all day if you don't start in the morning.
He's right. It all begins with that first step
from Uncle Frank.
It all begins with that first step.
And ditto, Frank. We are richer for the association, my friend.
And hey, that's a great segue into our poll question with the Canucks. You can't finish first unless you become first overall. So, hey, they've taken that first step.
Frank called the Canucks in preseason when few were.
No one was. Who was giving them support?
Just you, Frank.
Inside, that's it.
Just you.
Yeah.
No, I'm not tooting my horn. I'm just saying, like, they were almost universally picked as a non-playoff team, were they not?
I think they were bubble for most people.
In this market, you had people picking them to sneak in. But yeah, you're quite right. Nationally, they were not exactly a popular choice.
Yeah. So let me answer your poll question. Do I believe the Canucks are the best team in the NHL? The answer is no. However, what I think is most exciting about the position that they're in right now, and especially with the spot that Andrei Kuzmenko is in the lineup, can you imagine if Patrick Allvin, the most aggressive GM in the NHL, has $5 and some million to spend at some point to improve this team and take what is a square peg in a round hole, ship him off somewhere else, which he should have value, by the way, coming off of a 40 goal or close to 40 goal, 70 plus point season, and just get a better fit. Doesn't have to be exact, but having someone sit out as a healthy scratch, like all of a sudden, I'm telling you, I think if the Vancouver Canucks can make this move and pull that off with a much better fit, whether it's filling out your forward group or once again going to the well on defense, that I could begin to view the Vancouver Canucks as a legitimate.
Okay, so before
I didn't even get the words out. I didn't even get it out.
Before we throw names at you,
okay,
like a possibility, like, have you done any skulking around? Not so much for rumors. You can give rumors if you have them, inside scoops, but just like names that you just thought, that guy'd be a good fit. Has anybody jumped to mind as you've pondered this situation?
No, not yet. I haven't really dug in to do that. So I'm not comfortable throwing any out. But let me just underline the last three words that I said again.
Sure.
Legitimate Stanley Cup threat. That's 4.
Wow.
I believe it with the positional boxes that they've checked. Like, they have authentic stars at every position.
So with this management group, we forever go back to Pittsburgh. Is Jake Guentzel available? Will Jake Guentzel be available between now and the deadline?
I think the Pittsburgh Penguins have 45 days to figure it out.
Yeah.
February 10th-ish, something like that. Because Kyle Dubas is going to have massive decisions to make. And I would think that for a team that hasn't got, it's the same argument I would make with the Calgary Flames. You're not getting it done with these guys. What's your case to keep them longer term? And maybe you could say, well, Guentzel's the youngest guy of the group. Okay, fine, but he's knocking on the door of 30.
He's not that young. Yeah.
He's not that young. And so what? You're going to sign him to a 5, 7, 8-year contract to what? Have him be the best player on a rebuilding team that's tearing it down to the studs?
As a winger, right?
It makes no sense. I think he would be an elite trade chip at some point. Should the Pittsburgh Penguins not get their act together? That's the caveat I'll put on it.
So, Frank, speaking of having 45 days to figure something out, and the Canucks have more than that with Elias Pettersson, and they will absolutely tell you, hey, we got this year and next. Understand how long he's club controlled. But at some point, I think you need to know what you're paying Elias Pettersson next year to go about conducting your other business with regards to Hronek and Zadorov. I'm going to ask you about them in a second. Do you anticipate that the Elias Pettersson extension talks are going to heat up here after Christmas?
I think they've been quietly pushing along the whole time. I think the Canucks are more than ready to make a deal. I think they're, in fact, as aggressive as they possibly could be, knowing that the other side, I believe at this juncture, has more or less been stalling. That everyone's kept a tight lid on it. I don't think there's any negative here. It's just that I don't think the Pettersson camp from, his, I guess you would call it posture from the summer and not being in a rush to do things to continuing to evaluate what the market looks like. I think the Canucks are more than ready to make a deal, and in fact would love to have something done and signed, as I reported back at the GM meetings in November on the heels of Hall of Fame. Like, Patrick Allvin's met with all the players involved. But it's nice to play nice, but you got to get some work done. And it takes two to tango, which is the toughest part of this.
Yeah. And I think it was earlier this week, it may have been last week, on Filip Hronek, whose production has cooled a little bit here. You don't think this is starting with a 7, huh? You think he's an $8 million player plus on his extension?
Every day of the week and twice on Sunday.
Possibly.
What are the status? Yeah. Do you know, do you have any updates there in terms of talks?
I don't think there's been anything significant. I think there's been some like casual sort of preamble conversations that, as best as I can tell, have sort of parked things. And I think you're right. I think the pecking order, just from a pure math perspective, has to be to get Pettersson done first.
Before we get done with Pettersson here, what pushes us over the edge for the other side? Like what's can the Canucks make an acquisition that will please Elias Pettersson, that will make him feel committed? Like what is Elias Pettersson looking for here in order for him to feel ready for this situation? Does he want a winger? Like, is that part of what we're talking about here, that he wants to know that he's got somebody to work with here going forward?
I don't think there's a commitment issue. I don't think there's, like I said, I don't get a sense there's any hint of I need this or I'm pounding my fist on the table for that. I think he's pleased with how this year has developed. I think he loves seeing this team being in contender mode. But I think it just comes down to dollars and cents, right? Like, it's more or less, Matt, did I see you making a money sign? It's more or less show me the money.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you present the right starting digits of that AAV. And then I think you're probably going to hammer out the rest of it.
Yeah. You're most of the way there. I would think. I heard you say you're skeptical on their ability to re-sign Zadorov.
Yeah. I just think what he's looking for. And every time Dan Milstein tweets an emoji of a bag of money, I don't know what the true market value is for Nikita Zadorov. I guess this run with the Canucks will tell us a lot more about where he can stack up league wide. But I know a lot of teams on an independent basis view him as a third pair defenseman, and he thinks he's getting some kind of payday that I just don't think the Canucks, as much as we've talked about the depth and how you need to slot out your defense properly is so critically important to being a good team. You can't afford to pay, Pettersson one thing up front, Quinn Hughes one thing on the back end, Filip Hronek's not going to be cheap, and then all of a sudden overpay for a third pair defenseman. You can't be paying him $5 million a year, and that's the feeling without having anyone confirm it. That's the sense I get, is he's looking for like a 5x5.
The Canucks have got a handful of UFAs, and all of them are performing probably above expectation. And you're just not going to be able to give everybody a raise there, right?
Well, that, and also, by the way, the beauty of the trade for Zadorov is he improves your team in the here and now, and you barely really gave up anything to do
That's
it.
right.
Or you gave up
so
nothing.
Just he's the perfect guy to use and let walk.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Conor Garland just playing terrific hockey right now. That third line with Teddy Bluger and Dakota Joshua, a couple points last night. Finally, his third goal of the year. The underlying metrics have been terrific, and last night rewarded with some production counting stats. It's the status of his trade request, and can they afford to trade him right now, given the way he's playing?
I don't think it may be a standing trade request. I don't even know how to break down the nuances and semantics and dynamics of that. But what I would say is I think they're pretty comfortable with where things are at. And more to the point, they're not in any mode to be trying to shuffle things around right now to offload that deal. I think they've got bigger fish to fry. I think they realize that no matter what the underlying numbers and metrics say, the counting stats are going to have to be not just better, but way better in order to have teams truly interested in taking on that term. And so I think they just park it and say, hey, for better or for worse, we're kind of stuck with each other. We might as well make the best out of this that we can.
We noted the Florida Panthers opening that new practice facility, Frank, and how much easier it's going to make life for visiting hockey teams, not to mention the Panthers themselves. How much does that ratchet up the pressure on the Canucks to finally get a practice facility?
I mean, I can't believe that's their practice situation. I realize that the bulk of their work is done at their game arena, but having been to Van this year for training camp and going out to UBC for the first time, like, not a knock on UBC, the grounds and surrounding area are beautiful, but that is a Spartan facility for any NHL team to be sharing, and it's way less than ideal. And I guess part of the issue that I run into is like, it's kind of the same thing I do. I roll my eyes when GMs talk about how hard it is to make trades, dollar in, dollar out, all these different cliches. Like, yeah, real estate's expensive in Vancouver. It really is. But what's the excuse for all these other teams that have built unbelievable facilities in super expensive markets, in San Jose, in
South Florida?
Yeah, but like, look, they're like the Caps have a beautiful one in suburban Virginia, and like all these other places, they've all got in high priced, expensive markets. Like Florida is no different. Like, why not? What's the excuse to getting it done? Put a shovel in the ground, get steel in the ground. The Panthers made it happen.
A lot of players live out that way. Do you care, like, league wide, does the proximity of the arena to the practice facility, does that matter to you in terms of UBC's proximity to downtown?
So are you saying that a bunch of the players live out that way?
Yes. Yeah. So there's the convenience for that. Of course, the road teams don't care if they got to practice there because they're downtown. I mean, is that extraordinary, that distance from UBC to downtown?
It matters, I think, for sure. If everyone is on a trend where like they live out towards the practice facility because you're there every day, that's a different story. But the flip-flopping nature of what the Canucks do and how much time they do spend downtown is probably pretty annoying, I would think. So, if you're in a situation where, like the Flyers, for instance, here, their practice facility is in South Jersey, and almost everyone except for the younger guys on the team that still like to go out to dinner and do whatever, like almost everyone with a family lives 5 minutes or 10 minutes from their practice facility in South Jersey, which is like 20, 25, 30 minutes away from the arena. So
right.
But they go into it knowing that, like, if you come to Philly and you have a family, you're looking in South Jersey and it. If you're going and you build a facility out near UBC, like, great. A lot of people will migrate there because they're going to spend every waking minute there that they're not at the downtown arena.
Blake and I incidentally had a really good night in Philly once upon a time, Frank.
What do you mean incidentally? Like, come on. Is it like an accident?
No, we were there for the draft, and we decided let's go out and, hey, when in Philly, let's go to an Italian place. And the chicken.
Where'd you go? Do you remember it?
I don't remember the name, but the chicken parmesan came out, and it was the Fred Flintstone size. Like, I think it was in fact the entire chicken.
It was like a half a block away from the Masonic Temple there on that same street, I think.
Okay,
that's the only thing I remember. But hey, another story you picked up on yesterday was the local rights deals. Is there a reason why a Canadian hockey fan, why a Vancouver Canucks fan should care about all these Bally deals and local rights deals in the U.S. in terms of HRR and cap? Like, do you think it gets to that point where a Canadian hockey fan gives a rip about this?
Yeah, I think it matters because it could impact the cap. Mm-hmm. We're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue at stake for these 11 regional rights deals that are now reverting back to teams, and the NHL and these teams are not even getting, 100 cents on the dollar for what they negotiated to close out this year. I saw a report yesterday that suggested they're going to get about 80 to 85 cents on the dollar, which is still better than nothing. The NHL was concerned for a long time that at some point randomly this season and at the drop of a dime that they're going to be handed back all these rights and say, hey, good luck getting all 11 broadcasts on the air in short order that you have to produce yourself. So it's an expensive undertaking putting games on the air. Not only that, but now you have to go out and sell the advertising. You got to find partners. Like, there's a lot going on here from a pure league-wide perspective that may continue to evolve. You may see more regional entities get out of TV deals that they just can't afford the rights fees and they're bankrupt and move on. This has been a staple and a locked in sort of guaranteed line item on NHL team revenues for a long time. Hockey related revenue, that's what the salary cap is based on this year, 6.2 billion. If you knock it down to 5.9 next year, or whatever it might be, let's call it a few $100 million, you're going to see the cap go the opposite direction unless they can find new meaningful revenue to make up for it. So they've got a lot of work to do.
Hey, Frank, any chance any of these teams go full streaming? Just sell them themselves?
Yep, they totally could or they could build their own broadcast network and make it linear and also make it available streaming. Like I'd imagine at some point you're going to see a team that's a lower revenue team. Like if I were the Coyotes, that's what I would have done.
Yeah.
Instead of they did go the free model. It's free over the air, but I would have went right to, hey, you can get our game no matter where you want to watch it, on your TV, on your phone, on YouTube, doesn't matter where it is. We're putting it out there, consume it however you want it. That's how you really build an audience, but we'll see.
Marvelous stuff. Thank you for this. We'll miss you next week. We'll catch up a couple weeks down the road in 2024. Merry Christmas to the Seravalli family, and good luck on your full day drinking.
Yeah, thanks. Merry Christmas, everyone. Glad to be with you guys, and talk to you in 2024.
This Sick Harrison Price clip brought to you by Applewood Auto Group. And remember,
It's all good at Applewood.